I guess my last question about the Joe Rogan issue is, what do you think about the, significant portion of the left, which we see seemingly kind of constantly hand-wringing and pearl clutching and straight up calling for his censorship? We talked a little bit earlier about, back in the day on YouTube when atheism and secularism was really big. And I remember that transitioned almost overnight, very weirdly, into this anti-SJW phenomenon. I'm sure you remember that, know what I'm talking about, where a lot of the, content, and to be fair, a lot of it was cherry picking, the worst to the left. A lot of it was somewhat unfair, to be sure. But people were noticing and pointing out the fact that the left at the time, or at least what they saw as and thought of as the left, was very censorious. Kind of had this like petty authoritarian streak or tendency to it. They wanted to shut down speech they didn't agree with and label everything hate speech, label everything problematic. And again, I do worry that we see some of that, coming back, rearing its ugly head again in the form of these liberals, again, hand-wringing over Joe Rogan, calling for his censorship. And I think, what's his face? Sam Cedar went on MSNBC and literally called for Spotify to deplatform him. And again, I think that's you have every right to have that opinion if that's how you feel. But I'm more worried about how that makes the left look. Because again, I don't want to get back to a period where, and of course, we all know what the anti-SJW time period led directly to, which Donald Trump. So, I don't want the left to all be branded as and thought of as these censorious, petty, pearl clutching, whiny babies, instead of people that are perfectly able and willing to go on a platform and discuss their disagreements. Again, that's my big fear, is just how it looks optically for the movement, for the left. Do you think there's any merit to that, or do you think that I'm kind of giving into the framing of the right wing there?
No, I think there's a ton of merit to that. I think, yeah, I mean, I like Sam, but that is, I could not disagree more with that. And I actually also think it's interesting if you look at the way, that the Majority Report used to cover Joe Rogan, like a few years ago, versus now. And I'm not, I like everybody there, but I think that the approach is just different. And I think part of the reason is because of the ways that the culture war has changed the last few years. And I also think that, part of the reason is that I know for a fact, right, that a lot of that was really influenced by how Michael Brooks understood him, because I had several conversations with him about this. We co-wrote that article, and like Michael's point was always like, why should we like shine a spotlight on this like incredibly popular, widely liked figure when he disagrees with us, right? We should be shining a spotlight on him when he agrees with us, right? So that's why he did on the Majority Report. I think like the clips, like the one I think it was called like Joe Rogan puts Dave Rubin in a logic chokehold, with the clips of them arguing about the post office and regulation, and I still think that was a good approach, and it still makes sense to me. I mean, I think that I do get that COVID is a context that makes, I think that like sort of brings some of the things, like in that sort of mixture of Joe Rogan beliefs, that we talked about earlier, right? Like he's always been, I think, a little prone to certain kinds of conspiracy theories. He has, look, I'm very old. I remember watching news radio in the late 90s and where Joe Rogan, still with hair, played a handyman at the radio station named Joe, and they'd work in these jokes like for his character, like he'd talk about Area 52 and say, "Oh, you mean Area 51?" He's like, "No, that's what they want you to think. Like the real one is Area 52." And so yeah, I get that it's like a context that brings that out and that changes how some people feel, but without,
it's like a very Gen X thing about him. I feel like, what I mean? It's like, hey man, we've actually lived through the entire world before, man. We had computers and go back to Tepe and all. That was actually my favorite kind of Joe Rogan content, cards on the table.
Yeah, fair enough. You tuned in for the Mayans invented cell phones episodes. Yeah. So I think, uh, but look, I guess I'll just speak to the broader thing, without, without throwing any shade on particular people, since look, I've had nothing but good conversations with you guys. I know there are things that we really disagree about. You know, I would say the same thing for Samson and the Majority Report. But like, um, but I think just on the more general phenomenon of like leftists who sort of go along with that, like Team Blue and the culture wars reflexively, right? Which is what we're really talking about, right? That uh, since the left has so little real presence in American politics, it can be very easy to just get sucked into echoing, whatever Team Blue is saying on any given Tuesday. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. I mean, if what we're arguing about is like, should you know should there be voting rights laws or something, then you should echo that, right? But like, I think the problem is that you end up echoing it on a lot of culture war bullshit that like the more you think about it, the less it actually fits with your core convictions. So, the big point I've always made about and people who want to read more of this can read. I had an article in the Daily Beast about the Spotify censorship thing, like, I don't know, maybe a month ago. People can check that out. It's called like Progressives Who Want to Censor Joe Rogan Should Be Careful What They Wish For, I think is the title of the article. And the big point I'm making there is, okay, even if, I mean, like, let's pretend for a second that like Joe Rogan is not this sort of complicated person that we've been talking about for the last hour, right? Let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that Joe Rogan is like the most horrible person with the most horrible views who's ever existed. Okay, even so, even if that were true, I'd still disagree with this, right? I would disagree with it on principle, and I would also disagree with it strategically, because my God, if you're a leftist, right? I mean, if you have any views politically that are, to the left of, I don't even know, like Joe Manchin, right? That they're like, these companies are not your friends. They're you cannot trust them with these powers. And I know people say, oh, they have the powers, whatever, blah blah blah. But like, if you want them to like put in new rules for disinformation or whatever, those aren't just going to apply to Joe Rogan. In fact, those are going to mostly apply to smaller shows that you can that you can censor with much less pushback. And I guess I'll just say one thing that I said in that article, which is, if you imagine, I mean, take us back to the Hitchens conversation. If you imagine that Spotify and podcasts had already existed in 2002, who do you think would be more likely to be censored for disinformation? People who agreed with the New York Times and agreed with the government that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or people who said that Bush administration officials were conspiring to deceive the public about Iraqi WMDs? I mean, the question kind of answers itself.